What if the number one cause of your procrastination isn't laziness, but your brain trying to protect you from something it thinks is dangerous? This video breaks down two different 10-minute rules. One helps you finally start the things you keep avoiding. The other has been used by some of the most successful people in history, and it requires you to do absolutely nothing. Stay until the end, because one of these rules might actually make you less productive if you use it wrong. Here is the first question you need to answer honestly. Have you ever sat down to work on something important, something you genuinely want to do, and found yourself suddenly fascinated by the texture of your wall or the optimal way to organize your desktop icons? This isn't just you being lazy. This is your brain's ancient wiring misfiring in the modern world. Here is what most people don't understand about procrastination. The part of your brain responsible for survival, the amygdala, cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and a mental one. When you stare at a blank document or an overwhelming to-do list, your brain registers that stress the same way it would register a bear walking into your kitchen. The amygdala sends out distress signals. Your body releases cortisol. You feel anxious? And your brain screams one thing: avoid this now. So when you procrastinate, you are not broken and you are not undisciplined. You are actually responding exactly how your brain designed you to respond. The problem is that your brain is trying to protect you from something that cannot actually hurt you. And that is where the first 10-minute rule comes in. But how can a simple timer fix something as old as human evolution itself? There is a reason why every productivity expert eventually lands on the same piece of advice, and it has nothing to do with willpower. The first 10-minute rule works like this. You pick one single task you have been avoiding. You set a timer for 10 minutes, and you tell yourself something very specific. After these 10 minutes, you are allowed to stop completely. No guilt and no shame. You have permission to walk away. This sounds too simple to work, but there is neuroscience behind it. When you tell yourself you only have to do something for 10 minutes, you lower the stakes. Your amygdala stops screaming because the perceived threat is smaller. 10 minutes feels manageable, and 10 minutes feels safe. And here is what actually happens. Once you start, something shifts. Physicists call it inertia. Objects at rest stay at rest, and objects in motion stay in motion. Once you have spent 10 minutes writing that email or cleaning that corner of your room, your brain has already committed. The hardest part, the starting, is already behind you. Most people, when that timer goes off, keep going. Not because they are disciplined, but because the momentum has already taken over. But here is the strange part. There is another rule that works completely differently, and if you use the first one for the wrong kind of task, you might actually be making yourself less creative without realizing it. Imagine sitting at your desk, stuck on a problem for 30 minutes. Your head hurts, and you are getting nowhere. Someone walks up and tells you to go outside and do nothing for 10 minutes. Would that feel like giving up, or would it feel like the smartest thing you could do? This second 10-minute rule has a famous origin story. Steve Jobs used it constantly, and so did Charles Darwin. It goes like this. If you are working on a problem, a creative project, or any task that requires new ideas, and you find yourself stuck for 10 minutes staring at the screen with no progress, you have to get up and walk away. Not to another screen, and not to check your phone. You need to walk outside if possible and just move. Neuroscientist Matthew Roney explains why this works. The brain has different states. Focused mode is great for routine work, for answering emails, and for filling out spreadsheets. But focused mode is terrible for creativity. When you need a breakthrough, you need your brain to enter a different state, a loose, open, drifting state. Walking does something specific. It keeps you calm and alert at the same time. Your attention is gently occupied by navigating the world around you, which stops you from ruminating on the problem you are stuck on. And in that space, your brain starts making connections it couldn't make while you were forcing it. The answer comes when you stop looking for it. So you have two rules now. One tells you to start, and one tells you to stop. How do you know which one to use, and when? Here is where most people get this wrong. They take the just start rule and try to apply it to everything, and then they wonder why they feel burned out and uncreative. The first 10-minute rule, the one where you force yourself to start, works best for tasks that feel heavy, boring, or overwhelming. Emails, paperwork, cleaning, and administrative work. Tasks that require effort, but not necessarily insight. The second 10-minute rule, the one where you walk away, works best for tasks that require creativity, strategy, or problem solving. writing, designing, planning, and decision-making. If you force yourself to push through a creative block using the first rule, you will just end up frustrated. And if you walk away from a boring administrative task using the second rule, you will just end up behind on your work. The key is recognizing what kind of resistance you are feeling. Is the task hard because it requires effort? Use the first rule. Is the task hard because you cannot find the answer? Use the second rule. One builds momentum and the other builds insight. But there is one more layer to this. A recent discovery about why these rules work so well, and it has to do with something psychologists call the Zeigarnik Effect. Imagine walking into a restaurant and ordering a meal. The waiter brings your drink, takes your order, and then disappears. They never come back. You sit there for an hour with no food and no explanation. How long do you think you would think about that meal afterward? Psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik discovered something fascinating in the 1920s. She noticed that waiters could remember complex orders perfectly, but only until the food was delivered. Once the meal was over, they forgot everything. This became known as the Zeigarnik Effect. The human brain has a built-in need for closure. Unfinished tasks take up mental space. They nag at you and they whisper in the back of your mind until they are completed. This is why the first 10-minute rule is so powerful. When you spend 10 minutes on a task, you are not just making progress. You are leaving that task unfinished, and your brain, desperate for closure, will keep pulling you back toward it. The task becomes harder to ignore, not easier. You are essentially hacking your own psychology to make yourself want to finish what you started. So you have the neuroscience, and you have the practical applications. But there is one final piece that ties all of this together. A truth about productivity that most people never realize until it is too late. Why do some people seem to get everything done without burning out, while others fight the same battles every single day? It is not because they have more willpower, and it is not because they are naturally more disciplined. It is because they understand that productivity is not about forcing yourself to work more. It is about understanding how your brain works and working with it instead of against it. The first 10-minute rule works because it bypasses your brain's fear response. It tricks your amygdala into lowering its guard, so you can finally start. The second 10-minute rule works because it respects your brain's need for different mental states. It gives you space to find answers instead of forcing them. Both rules acknowledge the same truth. You are not broken, and you are not lazy. You are just fighting an ancient brain in a modern world. And once you understand the rules of the fight, you stop wrestling and start winning. The question is not whether you can force yourself to work. The question is whether you are smart enough to stop fighting. If this video made something click, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more content that actually explains how your brain works, instead of just telling you to try harder. And if you know someone who is always hard on themselves for procrastinating, send this to them. They might need to hear that they are not broken. They are just human.